What's up, Sterile Processing Universe? It's Hank Balch here. We're back with H20 Now You Know with Christian Abell. We're going to be talking about water testing itself. So if you've hung with us through the whole series, you know this is important, but you may not know exactly what it is and how to do it. So we're going to spend a little chunk of time today talking about the what, where, how, when, and why of water testing. So Christian, where do you want to start? What's the best way to explain this whole process?
Best way to explain a process is understanding what you're testing and what you're looking for, and at what touch points do you need to worry about them. I think understanding, the 101s, what are you using for your, municipal or utility water that's coming in? How's it treated? And what are the effects of it when we use it? And the number one fallacy in the United States that we have is that you go test your water and it's like, okay, it's drinkable based some of our standards. Okay, what does that mean when you put it into an environment and use it? And that water, you tested it, and that's great. But tomorrow might be different. It's not regulated. We're not controlling it. We're not maintaining it it's whatever the city pumps into the building that day, and you can have the effects of all the seasons. You have droughts, floods, water source changes from wells to lakes to rivers to all those other impacts. You have environmental impacts from, if you're in an agricultural area or an industrial area, all those things. And even simply building a building 2 blocks away from the hospital, you don't even think about your water quality will change for a period of time when you, and it's, to me, I don't like the concept. I think we're the wild, wild west using city water because we're not really, I think we're looking forward to having a minimum standard, but even if we're testing it quarterly, the construction might have started yesterday and we got 3 months of bad water coming in, and then everyone's scratching their head going, where are we getting corrosion or staining from at this point? So that's the, 101 is just even talking about the tap water. We're all over the board. It's, without it being regulated, we're a mess. Then the next easiest thing is, let's test the water and do all the basic salts and metals for the water we're producing in our RODI or whatever purified water system you're using. And we have that. So we have the ins and the outs, but we don't have the in between. And that's a trickier space to be able to capture. And the real truth behind the matter is the water quality during your final rinse of your washer, really what you want to be testing. Because we know we can control the water going in, it's pure, but what does it really look like when it's getting washed? And that's a huge delta that I find for most customers, because you have a lot of carryover effects. Some are profoundly different and really bad, and some are not so bad, and you can kind of work with the ins and outs a little bit better in order to control that without really changing much of the configuration of your process in the washer anyway. So keep that in mind, that's a really difficult area to be able to manage or monitor without special devices. And, if you overload your washers and they have a lot of geometry and you have 25-pound trays and you load it all up, it's holding a lot of that city water that you wash and maybe even potentially chemicals. And then you bring your purified water. Well, your purified water is not purified anymore. So that's kind of that, that's the carryover, which you have that remaining items on the surface that you can't see. And everybody looks good and the instruments are shining. You put them in the basket, sterilize them, it dries, you get brown stains up in the operating room and everyone's looking at SPD like, what are you guys doing down there? Look at this. It's filthy. Or you have iron elements, they oxidize and rust, you have brown dots. Well, they weren't there when they put them in the container. But, that's where, we need to go a little deeper into processing to understand that let's really measure the touch points of what's happening in our water for testing. There's a lot of things you can do on your own, and you might need a small investment and a little education on it, but, certainly you can take handheld devices, connectivity and pH monitoring, handheld devices and, dip them in different water qualities in your department and make sure, at least get a benchmark. If we get a certain standard, let's ST108 gets us into, hey, if you have your water production is less than 15, you should be okay. It's not necessarily true because it depends on what that 15 is. What it, if it's sodium and I don't know, something else inert, let's say sodium, let's just go with sodium. Okay, not really a big deal, but it's 15, the microsiemens are being reactive because you have chlorides. Well, it's a problem because you'll have corrosion. It's still a good benchmark. It's a good understanding, but and then pH isn't necessarily, there's effects that it has directly onto medical devices and different material compatibilities. You're more worried about pH when it comes to anodized aluminum because that stuff will rust and corrode and when it gets out of its safety net. And typically 8.5 or greater, anodized aluminum has a lot of different abilities to want to do different things or more susceptible to stain if and it's real. Again, water testing is relative to understanding what material you're talking about. Plastics, different grades of metal, as we all know, there's lots of different grades of metal, and aluminums and implants. There's so many different variations. You just understanding those water qualities and those components is kind of key to it all. So it's hard to make one test. In steam, we get into the steam world, that type of testing, that's not something that is really going to be easy for any department unless the sterilizer manufacturers devise a little port that everybody can take a little steam sample that's not going to injure somebody and take the gas, put it into a liquid, put it in a jar, and you send it to the lab and ask what's in it. Is
that a capability out there today, or is there equipment that has that little port out there yet?
Yes, there is. It's something
cool.
You have to kind of request, and you also have to be careful knowing what you're doing with it in order to do that. I mean, we have a special design device that we just put into the autoclave and turn it on, and it'll take that into, it takes the steam, convert it into a jar that's ready, lab prepared, and we send it to the lab. That's not for everybody to do. It's not easy, and it's also very expensive, but utilizing something built onto the machine that you can continually test from is a more sensible way of doing it. Or for that matter, in terms of technology, having a monitor that does it automatically, where if there's outside of parameters in terms of connectivity, the machine will alarm like, hey, this steam's not right, it's dirty. Or maybe like a really radical thought is using clean steam, and just maybe we don't need to monitor or filter stuff because it's clean. We don't need to worry about contamination coming through.
Right. Right. Yeah, that's a really interesting thought process, I think, for folks who haven't thought a lot about water quality or steam quality. Is all our focus is on parameters, on the time, on the temperature, and then we think, hey, steam is steam, water is water. As long as it's meeting this time and temp, then we're good. We're sterile, and there's no problems. What you're saying, well, yeah, actually, that steam quality is pretty dang important because that's your primary sterilant there. And yeah, I think that's really important to be understanding and aware of, just from the quality standpoint in your processes. To know we're at the end of time in this segment, I did want to call out, though, something that I think is a great kind of takeaway that really blew my mind, whenever I came across it last couple of years. That idea that water quality changes depending on the day or the season or what's going on around your facility. Like, you kind of blew through that, but that's really, that's not intuitive. The average person that's not thinking about water, not thinking about plumbing, that you wouldn't assume that, hey, if you turn on your tap today, it could be completely different water from what you got yesterday. And then bringing it into this conversation, that means if you tested yesterday and you're not testing today or you're not testing next week, then you could be experiencing issues that the data's not really surfacing unless you're testing again. So I think way back when I asked you a couple of episodes ago, is this something that we can do by ourselves or do we need help? That kind of makes the point of we either need technical help or innovation equipment help, like you referenced. and or consultative help, to come in with the resources and the know-how. So great series here, Christian. I really appreciate your time. Like we said at the beginning, we scratched the surface of the water here. There's a lot more to talk about in all of these topics and themes, and we didn't even introduce everything that there is. So if folks are tuning in and they're like, okay, you got me hooked, I want to nerd out on this, how do they get a hold of you?
Email, I guess, or contact through Aesculap USA. There is a link on the website consulting SAM Surgical Assets. And the program in which I am under is Surgical Asset Management. And there's a bigger umbrella.
We'll put that link on there.
I am specifically the manager of the technical processes, which is all the processing, testing, science stuff.
All right, so you're Bill, not a science guy for that team. That sounds good.
Right.
All right, well, for anyone tuning into this series, if you liked what you heard and saw, you can hear from Christian. He's been at a couple of our other virtual events and on some podcasts, so plenty of other content out there by him. There's articles he's quoted in around the industry as well, and you could always maybe hit him up at one of your conferences. We'll put his contact info below, and we want to thank you again for watching this series and encourage you, like we do all the time here at Beyond Clean, get your water right and keep fighting dirty. We'll see ya.